To talk about GIS and mapping racial equity in Asheville, North Carolina, we have Kristen McNamara with the City of Asheville. Kristen.
Thank you. Hey there. Can everyone hear me okay? Awesome. Before I get started, I kind of wanted to get a sense of the audience. So this is interactive. You raise your hand. Who is anybody like private industry or software or anything like that? Okay. And nonprofit? Okay. State? Okay. Federal? County? Oh, wow. Great. And a city or town? Okay. So a lot of city, town. That's great. There's a good mix of folks. And how many people are like GIS people, or like you mostly do GIS, or you're mostly like supposed to do GIS? Okay. Awesome. Thanks for that. Well, hello, good afternoon. My name is Kristen McNamara. I'm from the City of Asheville. Thank you so much for coming. I'm really excited to share this project with you. I've been working on for about a year and a half, and we'll continue to work on. It's definitely a work in progress. As most of my GIS projects are, it will always be a work in progress. I'll be doing a lot of reading during this presentation, so please bear with me. I just feel like the subject is super important, and I don't want to get anything wrong. But if I'm reading something that you see on the slide, just bear with me. I'm also going to start by talking about equity, and then give some information about demographics in Asheville, and I'm going to focus on African Americans. I'm going to visit some of the structural racist policies and talk about their lasting effects in Asheville using GIS. And I wanted to let you know I've spent about a year and a half attending training and conferences about equity and about learning about Asheville's history around race, but I have a lot to learn still, so I just wanted to be upfront. I want to acknowledge as a white person that I have benefited from many of the structural racist policies that I'm going to talk about. I've included methodology links and reference links and would be happy to answer questions, like quick questions as we're going through the presentation, and hopefully leave some time for discussion. And I appreciate your feedback, so please feel free if I make a mistake or something seems out of whack. Let me know, call me out. Great. So this is a story map, and I can't actually see it here, just as a warning. So I'm kind of working through here. So what is equity? In January of 2016, the Asheville City Council created a 20-year vision for the city, which included the statement, "Cultural diversity and social and economic equity are evident in all that we do." So equity is recognizing that not everybody begins from the same place or has the same opportunities or the same obstacles, and that some people need different things than other people, sometimes more. I didn't realize this. I kind of thought equity and equality were the same thing. And this graphic, hopefully you can see this, is kind of what made it click for me that if you look on the left, that's equality. Everybody's getting the same step stool. And then if you look at equity, you know what? Everyone is given what they needed, and everybody in that picture is thriving. They're all getting what they need. So that's kind of the difference. So I'm going to get to know Asheville. If you've not been to Asheville, come to Asheville. It's great. We're a small city in western North Carolina in the mountains. We have about 92,000 people and growing. Asheville is located on the traditional territory of the Sala-Gwedi, you might know as the Eastern Band of the Cherokee. Asheville is just west of traditional Catawba territory, which is the Pinkish area down here. If you see, there's kind of a confluence of two rivers. The river flowing south to north is the French Broad, which is a very important river. It's one of the oldest rivers in the world. And coming in from east to west is the Swannanoa River. So that confluence is close to like our downtown area. We have a couple of people from Asheville here. I'm going to talk about some demographics. So for this, I used 2010 census because I could get the total census and get Asheville city limits. Asheville is 79 point, this is where I wish I could see, 79.3% white, and the largest minority is Black or African American at a percentage of 13.4%. I do want to mention that language is important, and I'm going to try really hard to use the language that matches the data source. So I'm pulling this information for the census, so I'm going to say what the census uses. So if you hear me saying different words, then just as an FYI. I hope that makes sense. And then for the census, you can select a race, and then you can also select an ethnicity. So there's also the 6.5% are Hispanic, or Latino or Latina of any race. So that's getting to know Asheville. And then when we start to dive into some of the census data, we see that there are some large economic and educational achievement gaps in Asheville. Looking at the household income, can you see that okay? No? Okay. So come closer. So Asheville is below the state of North Carolina in income as a whole, as well as Black households are $12,000 below the city of Asheville median household income and over $16,000 below the state. So that's a pretty big gap. And then when we look at Black women, the median income is just under $15,000, and 39% of Black women were below the Asheville poverty line. So these numbers are scary. I'm going to go into some education information, which was actually really hard to get. So if you're interested in this information, come talk to me because I can show you how I did it. So this graph, I know it's probably hard to read, and I'm sorry, but and I can't read it either. But there's a significant, staggering achievement gap between white students and Black students in North Carolina and in Asheville. So the blue line is white students in Asheville. The red is white in the state. Green is Black in the state, and yellow is Black in Asheville. So the state gap for Black students is 16.8%, where Asheville is below. And then the difference between white students in Asheville and Black students in Asheville, the gap is 59.3%. So yes, that's upsetting, and you should be upset, and we should be upset. And then when we look at graduation rates, the gaps are not that different. So that could be telling a different story. So this is the stuff that as a community we need to be looking at and focusing on. So now I'm going to go a little bit back in time. I'm going to talk about redlining in Asheville. Okay. In the 1930s and 40s, during the New Deal, the Homeowners Loan Corporation, a government agency, recruited mortgage lenders, developers, real estate appraisers to create maps of color-coded credit worthiness and risk by neighborhoods. These maps and their accompanying documentation helped set the rules for nearly half a century of real estate practice. So if we look at this map, you can see I've color-coded so the A and the B. A is the least risk, and then B, C, and then D is failing. So in the D areas and C and D areas, banks would not lend money because they were told that these was high risk. This isn't a place that we should allow mortgages. Yeah, it's crazy, and it's a lot of Asheville. So Asheville's kind of like a cross. I don't have city limits up here, but it's similar to this, except it goes out to the east a little. And the center of Asheville was kind of working class, and As you go north, it starts to get more wealthy. As you go east, the same thing. South, the same thing. Right here, this is the little Biltmore area where we don't get any tax money. But there's some fancy. It's a wealthier area near Biltmore, and then West Asheville is a little different. West Asheville is working class, but stays working class. But when you look at this map, so we have an equity and inclusion director, and I was showing it to her, and she was kind of explaining it to me where it's like a Monopoly game. Like if we were picturing Monopoly and white people got to play first, and they got to play a couple rounds and buy up all the property, and then the Fair Housing Act happened in 1968, and the government's like, everybody gets to play Monopoly now, but African American people were coming in, and all the property is bought up, and there's houses and hotels, and so it's the rules aren't fair. Was how she explained it, and that carried it forward for me. I do want to show you one of the documents. This is for area D1, which is the center of the cross of Asheville. D1, it's kind of downtown, east of the river. If you remember, the river goes south to north. I know you probably can't see that, can you? I'm sorry. But I just want to point out that these are the reasons that this area was giving a failing grade, and one of them is like infiltration of Negroes. Like, this is government. In many instances, redlining in Asheville meant that those red areas were considered hazardous, and so people who did own homes couldn't get loans for renovations. Owning a home is one of like the fastest ways to generate wealth, and when you don't have that opportunity, the gaps just seem to widen. And this is from the Washington Post, that white families have nearly 10 times the net worth of black families, and the gap continues to grow. I'm going to move on to the next map, and this is African American displacement in Asheville. Am I doing okay? Like, not too fast or too slow? Okay. So this is people. So the red dots represent the amount of people that have left the census tract between 2010 and 2015. I tried to use the same census data years so that we could do some comparative analysis. So that big red circle, that's close to downtown Asheville in the center. That's an area called Montford. Montford is, that big circle is 435 people that have left Montford in those 5 years, which I couldn't believe. I had to do that math like 5 times just to see. But if we look around, you can see that kind of the center of Asheville seems to have a little more people leaving. The blue dots are positive movement, so people moving in. So you can see like the center of Asheville is having more negative, and outside and south is having more positive. The thing about downtown Asheville is that it's kind of where there's a lot of economic opportunity and transportation, and there's some benefits of living downtown, but it's expensive. Okay. The next map I'd like to share is the Neighborhood Change Index. Okay. So in this map, so I used Los Angeles, the Los Angeles indices of neighborhood change, and I thought I would try this out with Asheville, and it used weighted measures to do some actual comparison between neighborhoods, and I used census tracts because that was where I could get all of the data I needed. So it wasn't like, I feel like my neighborhood is changing, or that neighborhood is this or that. It's like, you could actually look at the numbers and have proof. In this map, the red and the orange are the higher change than the yellow and the green. So Downtown has seen a lot of change. West Asheville, West Orange has some change. South Asheville, and then North Asheville too. So those are the more changes happening faster in those areas. Did I go backwards? There we go. And I'll show you the measures that I used. So it's change of low to high income. So higher incomes, household size, the change in white non-Hispanic people living there, change in education, percent change in median gross rent. And I don't know about where you live, but rent does not go down where I live. So it's like increased rent. But when we look at these places with high change, we may feel like they could be vulnerable and vulnerable to gentrification. Gentrification is kind of like bringing up an area so that it conforms to like middle class taste. But there could be some really big costs to that. If the people that live there, it could be people of color, it could be low income people, if they are kind of forced out because their community is no longer there, it's unaffordable, it's changed, or they're just priced out. So there could be some big costs if we're dealing with gentrification. And Asheville is on like top 10 lists all the time. I know you're probably annoyed at it, but this is not a great top 10 list. We're in 2017 considered the second ranked city for fastest gentrification. And in the article, it pointed out that in the year 2000, a home in Asheville was $125,000, the median household price, I'm sorry. And in 2015 was $235,000. So in 15 years, there was an 88% increase. So if you think back to that Monopoly game, and you see that people are starting out like a little bit late, and how is anyone going to be able to afford a house when it's increasing that fast, where household income over that same 15 years has only increased 28%. So there's some stuff happening here. So where does GIS fit in? So we're at a GIS conference. Well, collecting the information, sharing it, and using it, integrating it into our decision making. That's what we do, right? Well, doing a quick overlay with this information. This map here might look familiar. There's the color orange and red colored areas are the high change areas from the neighborhood index. The outlined yellow and red are the redlining areas that were considered C and D or failing. And the red circles are the displacement. So those three maps that we just looked at, put them together, and you can see that there's a lot of similarities. So the lasting effects of redlining. Remember that Montford circle I showed you? Look at that Montford circle. It's red, red, red. But it gives us a chance to look at these areas and realize and acknowledge that they're vulnerable. And when we do our policies, practices, do something about that. Whoops, I keep going backwards. Urban renewal, this played another big role in Asheville in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. I haven't done anything with it yet. I want to. I just haven't had time yet. I'm looking for some interns that want to help. Come talk to me. There was a lot of displacement that happened because of urban renewal. I did add this website from the University of Richmond because it's really interesting, and they dive into a bunch of cities, and you can read about displacement maybe where you're from too. Police open data and transparency. I really wanted to add this because at the 2017 conference, I was here and I sat in on Fayetteville's presentation on open police data. And unfortunately, in the August of 2017, we had an incident in Asheville where a white officer used excessive force on an unarmed African-American pedestrian, and no one knew about it. And the way they found out was this was in August. In February, the body cam footage was released to the newspaper. And the community was mad. I was mad. Everybody's mad. I'm still mad. I got goosebumps thinking about it. And the community demanded that we release police data and more transparency. And the police department was like, I don't know, there's some legal issues with that. And we're like, Fayetteville did it. Thanks, Fayetteville. So we were able to work with them. Fayetteville sent us their methodology. I mean, there are some things that you can't release, but we were able to see what they had done and work with legal and police and release some data sets. But kind of the positive thing of this is that we created a community open data group. So the community has members, city IT is there, some members, and then the police is there, and we can have dialogue and talk about what the community wants, and the police can explain what they have, and we can talk about it. It's been very positive, though it wasn't right at first. Preserving history. This is my last map. So this is a project that I'm working on with hopefully the African American Heritage Commission in Asheville. If they vote it through, I might try to see if I can explore. And it's a crowdsource map where people can add history, and then we've got digital history that we can use, to look at and be like, oh, this is cool. But we can also integrate it into our maps. And when we're looking at planning and we're looking at affordable housing, we can see like what used to be there. And so people can add information or history. Oh boy. But what I tried to do was georeference some like old hand-drawn maps from the 50s. That Betsy Murray had made, and in them, I'm sorry, I can't really zoom in, there's a lot of points of interest. So like businesses, churches, just like really valuable information that we can have in our GIS for making decisions. Okay, so call to action. So I've kind of mentioned it a few times that by gathering this information and integrating it into our decision makings, we can build better policy and have better decision making. I mean, that's what GIS does. As a professional, we can kind of show what is real and what has happened. My organization is part of GARE, the Government Alliance on Race and Equity, and they provide an equity toolkit. And the toolkit is basically questions that we ask ourselves when we're working on projects, capital projects, affordable housing, to make sure that we're thinking about the who and the where. I clipped kind of the data questions, but when you're building a sidewalk or you're doing something the city does, like trying to ask the question like, who will be affected by this? Who lives there? Who will benefit by this? And making better decisions that way. And my next step is to keep working on urban renewal, maybe with some interns. I've got some references and information here. I would love to talk to you during the conference. If you have some questions or want to tell me some stuff. Also, as a call to action, I'd really love to, we have so much work to do, but I'd love to do it together. So let's collaborate. And if you're doing something where you live or you know about something, let's share and do this together. Thanks. Yeah.
I got a quick question. When you were showing the map of the redline information, and you were going back and actually showing where the displacement was that redline also based on the information from 2010 to 2015?
The redlining, this information?
Yes,
That's from the old maps, like the HOLC maps. That's from like I think the 30s. So those, but all of the other information was from the 2010 and 2015 census. Did that answer?
What I'm trying to figure
Oh.
out is that from you said, based from like the 30s to where it is now, the correlation is because of the redlining zones. That's the reason why there's gentrification happening.
It's a possibility. It's likely. I think it played a part. Yes, that's a great question. Thanks.
This is really interesting.
Thanks.
As when you were talking, that the image of knowing that you said a 59.3% gap.
What did that mean?
I mean, where did you get that information?
For education gap? Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't explain that very well. That was the end of grade testing. So the state will publish those, but it's really hard to find all that information. So I just found it in a table and I downloaded it and then I made a graph with that.
Because what I'm trying to figure out was that based on when you were talking about you do have your certain areas where they're predominantly African American or but what I'm trying to figure out is when you showed your next slide about the graduation.
Yes.
They still graduation. Was it based on school area, school zones that were in heavily based, or we're just talking about overall graduation?
Overall in Asheville city schools. So we have city schools and we have county schools, and the graduation we have one Asheville High. So it's just that one high. I mean, I know there's other parts of Asheville High, and I don't have kids, so I don't really know how that works. But if someone else from Asheville wants to correct me, but that's just Asheville High, yeah. Other question?
Can you elaborate on what you said there? That's where you showed the change.
Okay.
In particular, I live in North Asheville. I haven't seen a lot of change in North Asheville, but is that something else like the cost of housing?
Yeah, well, not the cost of housing. So the change index, can you see that okay? So that's a change of low to high income, and then change in just income, median household income, percent change in household size, change in percent white, non-Hispanic, higher education, change in education, and then change in rent. So it can be in either direction, yeah. Good question. Anyone else? Or, yeah.
How has this information actually been picked up by the basketball? How they used it at all?
Well, they don't maybe know about it yet. But I've shared it with our new city manager, who was really interested in it and is really excited about that. And in her vision, equity is super important, and she's also really spatial oriented. So she wants to know, like, when we do capital projects, like we just mapped this last week, like what is the area, like who's being affected, like. So I would say that I think it will be positive. I don't know. I'll let you know. Thanks for asking. Anybody else? We good? Yeah.
On the education, I've worked with those data sets for Forsyth County, and I know that you can go and look for each school and then break that down further by grade and reading and math and race. Did you look at any of those and whether they fell into the Redline district?
I didn't, but that's a great idea. I would like to. No, that's a wonderful idea. No, I've been a little bit like trying to get this presentation together. So I did do a little fast, which I apologize for, because it's worthy of way more time. But that's a great idea. And we could do that. Yeah. Thank you. What's your name?
Melissa.
Thanks, Melissa. Cool. Anybody else? Yeah.
Did you at all look for other cities for methodology
Well, we're part of GARE, which is, an alliance. So we do have like a access to like a network of people. And then the neighborhood change analysis, that was actually Los Angeles did that. And they did another piece of it as well, which we haven't done. They like took it a step further, but yeah, they're great.
All right.
Thank you.
Chris.